Welcome back to Face the Nation. We continue our conversation now with South Carolina Republican Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator, we were talking about the president's tweet this morning, the requests that have been made of you in terms of continuing investigations. This morning on Fox, Rudy Giuliani is continuing to say, quote, "You are telling him, not my job, man," when it comes to information he says he's handing over. You were just saying that any information coming out of Ukraine needs to be dealt with carefully and skeptically because it's likely the product of some kind of Russian intelligence operation.
Have we learned anything from Christopher Steele dossier? It was all a bunch of garbage fed to Christopher Steele to go after Trump from
Russia. And that's what you think Rudy Giuliani is delivering, garbage?
I don't know. I'm telling Schumer, don't vouch for Parnas. Okay. Don't put him in the gallery. I'm telling Rudy, you think you got the goods? Don't give it to me, because what do we know? We know that the Russian disinformation campaign was used against President Trump. They hacked into the DNC system, not the Ukrainians, and they're on the ground all over the world trying to affect democracy all over the world.
Who's paying Rudy Giuliani?
I don't know. Here's my message to Rudy. If you've got something coming from the Ukraine, turn it over to the intelligence people, the Department of Justice, to any Democrat. You think Parnas has got something on me? Well, then go to the Department of Justice and the Intel Committee. Do not pass this stuff on.
Okay. I want to ask you as well, because you have served in the U.S. Air Force. You are a military lawyer, a JAG. Do you support President Trump's decision to dismiss Alex Vindman, the lieutenant colonel who was serving on the National Security Council, who was compelled by a subpoena to go under oath and testify against the president?
I think his reassignment was justified. I don't think he could be effective at the NSC. As much as I support our military people telling the truth when asked, it's important they do. What have I learned in the last 2 years? CIA agents, Department of State, Department of Justice lawyers, FBI agents have a political agenda, and they acted on it. We found that out through the FISA investigation. As to Colonel Vindman, he was not allowed to be asked questions about his connection to the alleged whistleblower, to people working on ships.
He was asked and he denied.
No, he was not. They did not allow him. They did not allow the Republicans to go down that road.
His brother was also marched out of the White House. His brother also serves in the military and had no connection to this impeachment.
Nobody knows this. I can promise you this. He's never been asked questions. Did you leak to the whistleblower? People in his chain of command have been suspicious of him regarding his political point of view.
The National Security Advisor to the President sat in the chair you're sitting in last week and said he was confident that there were no leaks from the National Security Council.
Well, I am not. I want the man to be asked about what he did with the information. I appreciate his service, but there are FBI agents who took the law in their own hands. There are CIA agents who took the law in their own hands. There are Department of Justice lawyers who lied to the court. There's been a movement since President Trump was elected by people in our government to take him down.
Is this retaliation? Because the president has tweeted basically saying that Vindman was forced out not because of any kind of policy issue, not because of anything else, except for what he said was listening in on his phone calls and giving horrendous reports.
We're not going to be intimidated against asking questions to the whistleblower. Who is the whistleblower?
He is an officer, and he is not allowed to speak out on his own behalf. Neither are his fellow military officers allowed to do so.
I don't know what role he played with the whistleblower, if any, but we're going to look. I like Joe Biden. He's a fine man, but we're not going to give you a pass.
Should Gordon Sondland have been fired as well?
He's a political appointee. He serves at the pleasure of the president. He came before the country and
under
oath.
But it was retaliation.
Gave the story as he said it. We're not going to live in a world where the Department of Justice, the CIA, and the FBI can cut corners, go after Trump, and nobody gives a damn. As to Colonel Vindman, thank you for your service. But I'm going to, hopefully somebody will ask questions of you about the role you played with the whistleblower, if any. And if there's nothing there, fine.
All right, Senator Graham. Thank you for joining us this morning. When we come back, a rare interview with the Chinese ambassador to the U.S. We will ask him about the coronavirus. We want to take a closer look at efforts to contain the now over 37,000 confirmed cases of coronavirus in China, where the death toll stands at least 811. Joining us to talk more about the virus is China's ambassador to the U.S. Welcome to Face the Nation, Ambassador Cui.
Thank you.
Our condolences for these
Thank you very much.
hundreds of fatalities. Why hasn't the virus been contained?
Well, you see, this is a new virus. So virtually very few people knew anything about it at the beginning. That's how people are still learning to discover more about the virus and how it affects people and the channels of infections and trying their best to stop it.
The U.S. has offered repeatedly to send CDC experts, American experts, to help out. Why does Beijing continue to ignore those offers?
I don't think it's been ignored. First of all, we have...
But you haven't said yes.
Well, we welcome the American experts to participate in our efforts. And we are coordinating with the World Health Organization because a lot of things are done under the auspices of the World Health Organization. We certainly welcome American experts to join the expert group that the WHO is assembling. And I'm sure they will be going to China very soon.
You expect Americans to be there as part of the WHO, but you don't want the CDC there?
First of all, American experts are on the list recommended by the WHO. We certainly respect, I think all of us respect the WHO as the most professional intergovernmental body in the world. And for the US CDC, they have very frequent, regular contact with their Chinese counterpart, the Chinese CDC. And even beyond that, some American experts have come to China already on their own individual basis. So there is ongoing contact, not only between the two governments, but also between the two CDCs and between the academic institutions, and even some American companies are also offering help, technical help.
Well, I asked the question because it also gets at, there's a lot of unknown and a lot of suspicion because of that. And in fact, this week, Senator Tom Cotton, who sits on the Senate Intelligence and Armed Services Committee, suggested that the virus may have come from China's biological warfare program. That's an extraordinary charge. How do you respond to that?
I think it's true that a lot is still unknown. And our scientists, Chinese scientists, American scientists, scientists of other countries are doing their best to learn more about the virus. But it's very harmful, it's very dangerous to stir up suspicion, rumors, and spread them among the people. For one thing, this will create panic. Another thing is that it will fan up racial discrimination, xenophobia, all these things that will really harm our joint efforts to combat the virus. Of course, there are all kinds of speculations and rumors. There are people who are saying that these viruses are coming from some military lab, not of China, maybe in the United States. How can we believe all these crazy things?
You think it's crazy. Where did the virus come from?
Absolutely crazy.
Where did the virus come from?
We still don't know yet. It's probably, according to some initial outcome of the research, probably coming from some animals. But we have to discover more about it.
There has been some outcry on social media, particularly after the death of Dr. Li Wenliang. He had made public warnings for weeks before the government acknowledged this was happening. In fact, authorities had forced him to disavow what he had said previously, which turned out to be true. The Communist Party of China is now investigating this. Why?
Well, we are all very saddened about the death of Dr. Li. He is a good doctor. He was a devoted doctor, and he did his best to protect people's health. We are so grateful to him. But you see, he was a doctor, and a doctor could be alarmed by some individual cases. But as for the government, you have to do more. You have to base your decisions, your announcement on more solid evidence and science.
But do you think silencing him in the beginning was a mistake?
I don't know who tried to silence him, but there was certainly disagreement, or people were not able to reach agreement on what exactly the virus is, how it is affecting people. So there was a process of trying to discover more, to learn more about the virus. Maybe some people reacted not quickly enough. Maybe Dr. Li, he perceived some incoming dangers earlier than others. But this could happen anywhere. But whenever we find there's some shortcoming, we'll do our best to correct it.
Have Chinese authorities detained the citizen journalist Chen Qiushu? He has disappeared, and his videos revealed a lot of what was happening with this virus.
I'm sorry, I have never heard of this guy, so I don't have any information to share with you.
His videos are how the rest of the world has seen some of the images of what's happening. I want to also ask you quickly, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave an extraordinary speech yesterday to a number of governors from all around the United States. And he harshly criticized the Chinese Communist Party. And he said that your country is targeting states, cities, schools, academic institutions to try to figure out how to exploit them. What exactly is the intention of the Chinese government? Because the Secretary of State says it's not good.
I always believe the real foundation of China-US relations is the friendship and mutual understanding between our peoples. So this is the root of state-to-state relations. And there's such an enthusiasm among American states, cities and towns, and ordinary Americans to learn more about China, to develop friendship with Chinese people, to facilitate cooperation between the two countries. Well, I don't think anybody has any reason to against the will of the people.
Well, he specifically referenced concentration camps in Xinjiang. He talked about American institutions inadvertently investing in surveillance of Muslim minorities. Do you want to respond to that point?
That's totally wrong. That's totally wrong. Because the core issue in Xinjiang is how to combat terrorism. You see, some years ago, until most recently, people in Xinjiang were victims to rising terrorist attacks. There were thousands of such attacks, hurting and even killing hundreds of thousands of people. So we have to do something to stop this threat to the very well-being and the lives of the people there.
Okay.
So with our tremendous efforts, now for the last 3 years, there has been no such terrorist attack. So people have a much better safety there, security there, and people are happy there.
All right, Ambassador, thank you for telling your side of the story. We will be right back with new numbers from our CBS News Battleground Tracker. We turn now to some political analysis from our panel. Jeffrey Goldberg is the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic. Leslie Sanchez is a CBS News political contributor. Jamal Simmons is a host on Hill TV and also CBS News political contributor. And Jerry Seib is the executive Washington editor at The Wall Street Journal. It is great to have you all here. I want to get to the new poll numbers, but first, I think we need to digest some of what we just heard. We had two pretty substantial interviews. Jeffrey, the Chinese ambassador at the tail end of our interview said people in Xinjiang, China are very happy. To be clear, the U.S. government says there are between 1 and 3 million Muslim minorities in camps. The Pentagon's called them concentration camps.
Right.
How do we, knowing that kind of denial of what is established fact, how do we understand everything he told us?
Well, what you have to understand is that the Chinese government is lying about the nature of what's happening in these camps. When you take between 1 and 3 million people of a particular ethnic group against their will and concentrate them in prison camps for re-education, it seems like a fair thing to say that that's a concentration camp. The Chinese ambassador is arguing that the people are happy. I would simply suggest that you should let the international media in to these camps, and we'll go ask them ourselves.
I will take them up on that.
Yeah, I mean, we're on a panel road trip.
Yes, there we go. I wanted to make sure we didn't leave that there. Jerry, I want to pick up with you on some of what we heard from Senator Graham as well. The president sent that tweet right as the show went on the air. It was directly aimed at one of our guests who he knew was going to be appearing. What did you make of what Lindsey Graham said he was willing to do and what the president seemed to be asking him to do?
Well, I think, first of all, we're at kind of an awkward transition point here in which we're moving beyond impeachment and beyond the Mueller report potentially, but the president doesn't really want to. He wants some retribution. You saw that over the weekend with the firing of witnesses. And he wants to know who's the whistleblower, and he wants the Bidens investigated. And I think Lindsey Graham was saying, hold on, let's not go down that path. Don't turn me into the Republican Party's Christopher Steele, as he said here. And so I think you have the emergence of some tension within the Trump coalition about whether we really want to continue going down this path or whether maybe it's time to declare victory and move on.
Leslie, I mean, doesn't that get back at the heart of what this impeachment inquiry was about, which was this question of things being aimed with taxpayer dollars at actually being part of a political opposition research arm rather than what they are officially called?
Well, that's particularly the case with FISA, right? And the president has strong grounds to stand on when he was saying that there was an extension beyond what it should have been. But particularly, I think you have to look at it from a political lens. The president knows that there is a lot of, he called it witch hunts, he called it corruption, that he wants illuminated. He wants more transparency, and he's really relying on the Senate to do that. The independence, I know we talk about this. Politically, it works. Politically, it's part of an effort that galvanizes and really it's building a cohesive base that's behind the president wanting to illuminate these issues.
And yet,
It's amazing to me that they want to illuminate issues in the United States Senate when they refuse to call witnesses in the midst of an impeachment trial where we were having real-time information coming out in the press for people to find out about what the president was up to. At the same time, we're seeing the president now begin to punish witnesses who came forward, fire people from their jobs, move them out of the way. I think we're now seeing Donald Trump unleashed, and it is as frightening as people thought it might be.
and you believe these investigations or calls for them will continue as long as Joe Biden stays in this presidential race?
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure it'll move on to someone else. And it may not be the Ukrainians, but they'll find somewhere else to go after Pete Buttigieg or Michael Bloomberg or whoever becomes the Democratic frontrunner.
The pattern in Washington is to move on, but Donald Trump doesn't move on. And that's what we're going to see in the next few months.
Joe Biden, we'll see how he fares on Tuesday, but he didn't really have a very good week, at least kind of a rocky start, certainly out in Iowa. You know, he was thought to be at least in the top three. And was a distant fourth. In our most recent Battleground Tracker numbers, I want to tell you the current rankings. Bernie Sanders, as we mentioned, top spot 29%, Pete Buttigieg 25%, third Elizabeth Warren at 17%, then Biden 12%, then Amy Klobuchar, 10%. And this survey in the field before the debate. So we'll see. These numbers are fluid up in New Hampshire, where the poll was conducted. What do we make of this? I mean, Joe Biden's still in the fourth spot here, Jamal.
He is, and I got to tell you, when I take a look at this and I see Joe Biden in fourth place in Iowa, I see him perhaps coming in fourth place in New Hampshire. I'm not sure what happens in Nevada, but there's this sense that he's going to hold on in South Carolina, and that just defies all political logic. Each one of these things is building on each other. I think the voters he's counting on, those older African-American voters in South Carolina, are paying attention to what's happening in these early states, and if he looks like they're with him because they think he's a winner, and if he's not winning, I'm not sure how they hold on to that. The other thing that we know here is that Elizabeth Warren seems to be overperforming her poll numbers, but with an organization. So that means she's probably in third place. Maybe she comes up a little bit better. And Bernie Sanders, though, is probably going to win another one of these states, which means that Democrats in D.C. and around the country are going to be really wrestling with what to do next.
And Leslie, is that the Republican sort of best wish, best hope to have Bernie Sanders be the nominee?
Absolutely, because the contrast will be very stark. And I want to go back to this impeachment issue, Jamal, with all due respect on that issue. The one thing that it did do from a political standpoint is it accelerated the campaign, not only in organizing the president's message, which has proven to be very particularly effective, but it's also increased the negatives on the Hunter Biden issue that you're seeing kind of the effect realpolitik with Joe Biden, and I don't know if he's going to be able to survive that. It's been very impactful, but money. They raised $117 million, meaning the Trump campaign and the apparatus, just within the time of impeachment. So while the party is very organized around this message and around, the contrast to that, the Democrats are obviously very fractured, and you can speak more about that.
Jeffrey, the president essentially launched his own re-election on the floor of the state, giving the State of the Union address this week. Prior to that, he had the big Super Bowl ad. He seems to be making, I want you to weigh in on this too, Jamal, he seems to be making a push at trying to build support among minorities in particular. He thinks that that's winnable for him. He's really focused on that in his ads, and he was focused on it in his language at State of the Union.
Right. He was not only launching his re-election campaign, it seemed like he was also launching a new reality TV show at the same time. It was an amazing thing to watch, for people who've watched State of the Union in the past. Yes, there's a very concerted effort to work on African American votes. That's through various prison reform, judicial reform issues. He doesn't do terribly poorly with Latino males in some parts of the country. We've all said this in a million different ways. Take away Twitter from Donald Trump. Take away some of the extra meanness and focus the message. He could reach certain minority communities, people of color, in ways that he's not. And I'm wondering if he has the discipline to keep this pivot going, or the next time a person of color, annoys him, he goes out of his way to attack them and remind people what his record is on questions of race. But there's definitely an effort.
I'm going to send this flag up to the Democratic Party. People need to understand this. We talked to Terrence Woodbury, who's a young African-American pollster. He has been saying for months that he thinks Trump is going very hard at African-American men, particularly younger African-American men, Kim and Kanye West, ASAP Rocky getting out of Sweden, HBCU money. He's got a whole list of things the president has been doing. I think they're not going to let up. And he doesn't have to win it. He just has to tick it up a couple of points in some key places to have it count. And Democrats need to have a candidate who really has a strategy about how to deal with that. And if Bernie Sanders is not the nominee, I will tell you a lot of Bernie Sanders voters are anti-establishment voters more than they're Democrats, and they might get wooed by Donald Trump.
And this also comes at a time when the hottest Democratic presidential candidate happens to be Pete Buttigieg, who has noticeable problems with the African-American community, so maybe there's a kind of a harmonic convergence here. But I also wanted to add that the other person who had a great week this week was Michael Bloomberg, right? So the scenario that's unfolding right now is got to be exactly the one that Bloomberg had in mind when he got into the race late. A fade by Joe Biden, a growing concern within the Democratic Party about nominating somebody as liberal as Bernie Sanders, and a really resilient President Trump emerging as a threat to win re-election. That's the Bloomberg formula, and it's all kind of fallen into place this week. So he's sitting on the sideline right now listening to everything we're talking about and saying, well, that was kind of my bargain when I got in.
All right. Thanks to all of you for helping us digest it all. We will be right back.